you've spoken a lot about CRISPR, especially in one of your TED Talks, and I wanted to get into CRISPR for a little bit, and the stem cell self-renewal processes, tools to reverse aging. What are some of the most exciting ways that stem cells are being used at the moment, whether it's in general or specifically to reverse aging, and how good are these tools at what they do?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Stem cells is such a tricky field. I got into it really early on in the early 2000s. There was a lot of controversy around it then because we were using human embryonic stem cells in research, and there was a lot of sort of ethical conversations around that. But in any case, I got into that in large part because my sister, when we were young, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And at the time there weren't, and even still, there weren't really viable treatment options for someone like her. In that disease, your immune system attacks cells of your pancreas so that you're no longer able to regulate your insulin or your glucose in your blood. And so I got into science in large part because I saw a need around serving people who didn't have therapeutic options and whose diseases weren't well enough understood to create innovative therapies. And so stem cells to me seemed like such a game changer because you have these cells that have this great potential. They have the ability to become many, many different types of cells. And so we start thinking about cell replacement therapy and, cell renewal and things of that nature. And since I started that training now, gosh, how long has it been? 15 years ago or so. So much has happened in that space. And we understand much more deeply how a lot of that biology works. And I would say that we still aren't where a lot of people think that we are with the science and with the therapeutic potential. I mean, we've actually been using stem cell therapies for a really long time. When you think of blood transfusions, that's a lot of what's happening. You're putting in blood cells and they are able to populate in a patient, especially when you're, for example, in a cancer patient, you're fully depleting their whole system with radiation or something like that, and then they get an infusion afterwards of cells that repopulate that. So that's not new. But I think from the standpoint of using stem cells to support cell renewal and to support longevity, I think there's a long way to go before we have really clear data on that. I do know that we have, a lot of biomedical development that's happening right now that's looking at reprogramming cells to shift their identity from one type to another that can help support healing, for example. So, heart disease is one of the leading causes of death in the United States. And so there are a lot of I don't want to use jargon, but there's a lot of, scientific models, like experimental models that are being used right now where we can basically simulate something like a stroke or a heart attack in an animal and then apply cells or some sort of molecules that stimulate cell renewal to help with the speeding process, to help with the healing process, and also to reduce the scarring that occurs. And I think that's probably the area with stem cells that is most likely to be effective and in the clinic soon, which is like being able to improve healing, but also not be tumorigenic and reduce scarring. And that's always the difficulty with stem cells, is you have this careful balance of wanting things to renew and regenerate and be fresh. But a lot of the genetic programs that drive those characteristics also turn on in cancers. And so it's a really careful balance between when you're getting something that you're sort of restoring to a more youthful physiologic state, but not accidentally activating a tumorigenic program and causing cancer. That's like one of the number one fears in that field.
Really?
So it's and there's a lot of complexity there because you're adding cells into a body, or in some cases you're putting in factors that can stimulate cell division to promote renewal, like we've talked about. So it's a tough space, and there's a lot of people hard at work on it, and there are some companies out there that are doing it. I would say that there's a lot more, how would I put it? There's a lot more kind of hand-wavy stuff that I've seen that's promoting healing and promoting, stem cell therapies that I just think aren't proven. And it's a little bit of a scary zone because I think there's high potential for there to be bad things happening. The best case scenario is that nothing happens. Worst case scenario is that someone, gets cancer from a treatment that they thought was going to help them with their knee surgery or something. So, it's tough, and the data are mixed still. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you hear all the great stories that happen, the positive outcomes, and especially if you follow sports like baseball, there's a lot of guys who will opt to go to another country and get stem cell replacement on their rotator cuff or something before they get surgery, or UFC. And you hear the stories of operations that went well, but there's no incentive for people to publicize the ones that didn't go well, or maybe even just went okay. Because if you're a business, I imagine you want to attract more and more athletes, especially professional athletes that have the money to blow on these type of operations. And I don't know nearly enough. It's just as someone who is a washed up college baseball player, kind of following some of the stories of guys coming back from injury. Sometimes stem cell therapy is thrown around, but it does seem like some aspects from it, at least from the articles I read or interviews I listen to, do seem shady in a field with a huge amount of potential.
Yeah, and that could be very lucrative too. Money drives a lot of development, and if it was very efficacious, we would have plenty of clinics in the United States that offer it. It's not absent because we haven't figured it out. I mean, it is absent because we haven't figured it out, but it's more because when you actually look at all the data, they aren't clear in support of using that kind of treatment. And that's kind of the bottom line. And so for me, for people who come to me, like friends and family who ask me about this, knowing that I've been in the stem cell field, I always say that the data just aren't there. And, it's everyone's decision how they want to proceed. But for me and for my colleagues and the mentors that I've had who work in stem cells, that's kind of the party line until we get clearer data that show that the benefit outweighs the risk. It's not going to be a thing that we recommend. And, everyone's going to take risks that they're comfortable with. And a lot of people do. And I actually know a number of people who've had some sort of stem cell treatment to help, especially with some sort of bodily injury. But it's just something I would never do. And I would urge anybody dear to me not to do until we have clearer data that are, because at the end of the day, to me, what I wonder, especially in these other places in the world that are doing it, I wonder what's actually in there. And I think that's what's hard, is characterizing what is being put into your body and where is it going and what is it doing. And
is it actually stem cells?
There's a huge amount of data actually on just the placebo effect. There's a huge positive benefit we get just from doing any kind of intervention that we believe will work. Our mind is incredibly powerful, and by taking a pill that has no active ingredients in it, we can relieve a whole host of very real, very physiologic symptoms. So, I wonder how much of it is that, and it's hard to say because, we're not collecting the data.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. As a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full, uncut, 2+ hour episodes of the AUXORO podcast, plus gain access to 2 bonus episodes every month at auxoro.supercast.tech. Link is also in the description. Thank you so much for supporting quality content from independent creators like myself. Cheers.